You'd think by now I'd be used to chaos. It's kind of the default in my city, especially lately. Rent's up, wages aren't, and everyone I know is barely hanging on. So when I saw the flyer about the housing protest, it didn't take much convincing. I needed to be out there, not just for the cause, but because standing still lately feels like drowning. That Saturday was overcast, typical for early fall. The air smelled like rain that hadn't committed yet. I threw on a hoodie with a cracked defund evictions patch on the sleeve and joined the crowd gathering near City Hall. It wasn't huge, maybe 300 people, but it felt like more with all the voices chanting and signs bobbing in the air. I was with my friend Cam at first, weaving through the crowd trying to find our crew. That's when I saw him. This guy standing off near the news vans, arms crossed, kind of scanning the scene like he was looking for someone. He was hot, objectively. Buzzed hair, broad shoulders, black jeans, boots, not the fake punk kind, but the I've been on my feet for 12 hours kind. He looked out of place. No sign, no chant, no camera, just watching. I nudged Cam. "See that guy?" Cam glanced. "Yeah, plain clothes. Bet he's a cop." I laughed like he was joking, but Cam just shrugged and kept moving. The guy caught me looking, held my gaze for a second. Then he nodded. Just a little, like acknowledgement. I looked away fast. It wasn't until about 40 minutes later, after we'd marched down Pine Street and were taking a breather near a food truck, that I noticed him again. This time he was closer, standing behind a line of orange barriers as a few officers redirected traffic. Except now, he was in uniform. My stomach dropped. Same buzzed hair, same jaw, same boots. Cam wasn't joking. That hot guy, he was a cop. I didn't say anything. Just stood there like an idiot, clutching my water bottle, while my brain tried to reconcile what I'd just seen. The crowd shifted again, and I lost sight of him, which was probably for the best. I told myself to forget about it. But I couldn't. Not when, 2 days later, I ran into him again, this time in civilian clothes, standing in front of the laundromat down the block from my apartment. We locked eyes. He smirked. "You ever figure out what you were protesting?" I blinked, completely caught off guard. "What?" "Saturday. You were shouting about rent control like your life depended on it." I crossed my arms. "It kind of does." He tilted his head. "Fair." I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "So, what were you doing there? Spying?" He shrugged. "Working. Kind of. I'm in community response." I narrowed my eyes. "That's just rebranded PR for street-level surveillance." He smiled like he was used to hearing that. "Or it's the reason nobody got trampled when the crowd pushed past the barricade." I rolled my eyes. "Don't act like you're some savior." He held up his hands, mock defensive. "Didn't say I was." There was a pause, just long enough to feel weird. "You live around here?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yeah." I figured. He glanced at the laundromat. "Was gonna grab a coffee after. You want one?" I should have said no. I knew better. But I said yes, and that was how it started. With me sitting across from a cop at a busted-up table in a bodega cafe, sipping lukewarm espresso and arguing about literally everything: policing, protest tactics, housing reform, systemic accountability. He didn't flinch at any of it, didn't push back defensively, just listened, offered some of his own takes, didn't pretend like he knew better. His name was Ben. And I hated that I liked the way he said mine. I didn't expect to see him again after that coffee. It felt like a one-time thing. A fluke. A weird moment where the universe just decided to mash two incompatible people into the same afternoon for its own twisted amusement. But a week later, there he was again, this time in line behind me at the bodega near my place. No uniform, no badge. Just black jeans, a hoodie, and that same "I know something you don't" look on his face. "Let me guess," he said, eyeing the oat milk in my basket. "You're one of those. Milk is oppression guys." I rolled my eyes. Wow. You always this charming in public? Only when I'm stalking people I met at protests. He replied dryly, then added, I'm joking, I live upstairs. Of course he did. I paid for my groceries and walked out, fully expecting him to let me go. But he followed, same casual pace, like we were in some kind of second date I didn't agree to. So he said as we reached the corner, You still mad I'm a cop? I stopped. I'm not mad, I just don't trust you. That's fair, he said, and somehow that made me angrier. I stared at him, trying to figure out what his deal was. Why are you talking to me? He shrugged. I don't know, maybe because you're interesting. Or because you didn't flinch when I said I was a cop. Or maybe I just liked our argument last time. I didn't know what to say to that. The worst part? I had liked the argument, and maybe that was part of the problem. Talking to him felt like holding a match too close to my fingers. Stupid, but warm. We didn't exchange numbers, but over the next month I saw him 4 more times, always casual, always random. At the gym, at a taco stand near Broadway, once, at a community forum for tenant protections, me sitting in the crowd, him leaning against the back wall in uniform, arms crossed, watching. It became this unspoken thing. We never planned it. But somehow, we kept ending up near each other. And every time we talked, it was the same. Guarded at first, then slowly unspooling, like we were testing the limits of how much we could disagree without breaking something. Ben, for all his flaws, wasn't an idiot. He knew what I thought of cops. He didn't try to sell me on some good guy in a broken system line. If anything, he listened more than he spoke. Once, I asked him if he ever felt weird about it, being on the inside of something so many people hated. He looked out at the street, chewing the inside of his cheek, then said every day. That stuck with me more than it should have. The turning point came on a night I hadn't expected to see him at all. It was pouring, and I'd just come back from a tense organizing meeting where nothing got resolved and everyone left more pissed off than when they arrived. I ducked into a dive bar near my apartment just to get out of the rain. I figured I'd order 1 beer, scroll my phone, cool off. But then he walked in, dripping wet, black jacket soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. He didn't see me at first. Just headed to the bar, ordered something straight, and took a deep breath like he'd been holding it all day. I watched him for a minute, debated whether to say anything. Then, against every ounce of judgment I had, I slid onto the stool next to him. He glanced over, then gave that small half-smile he always did when he was surprised but pretending not to be. Rain's a bitch, he said. I shook my head. What are you doing here? Just got off shift. Didn't feel like going home. To the apartment above the bodega? He smirked. Yeah, that one. There was a beat of silence. You want to talk about it? I asked, not even sure why. He looked at me for a second, then downed half his drink. Nah, not tonight. All right, we sat there for a while, not talking much. Just existing in the same quiet, damp space, while the bar filled up around us. It was oddly comfortable. He paid for both our drinks when we got up. Didn't ask. Just did it. As we stepped outside into the downpour, he hesitated. You need a ride? He asked. I live 2 blocks away. Still, he said. It's coming down hard. I stared at him. You offering me a ride in a cop car? He laughed. God, no. I've got my own truck. I paused. Then, maybe against my better judgment, I nodded. That's how I ended up sitting in the passenger seat of a beat-up Navy pickup that smelled like coffee and dog hair, watching the rain streak down the windshield while Ben drove slow through empty streets. He didn't say much, but his hand brushed mine once on the gear shift, and neither of us moved away. When we got to my place, he idled at the curb. You want to come up? I asked. I don't know why I said it. He looked at me, long and hard, then shook his head. Not tonight. Why? He smiled, soft and tired. Because if I do, I don't think I'll want to leave. He drove off into the rain, taillights vanishing into the dark. I stood there, soaked, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. That was the night I stopped pretending it was just coincidence. Whatever this was between us, it was real. And it was about to get a whole lot messier. I didn't hear from him for 3 days after that night, which was fine. I mean, it was supposed to be fine. I kept telling myself that every time I walked past the bodega and looked up at the second-floor window, every time I checked my phone and saw nothing. We didn't even exchange numbers, so it wasn't like I was expecting a goodnight text. But I guess I was expecting something. And that was the problem. I was in my apartment, sitting on the floor with takeout spread out on a stack of milk crates when I finally saw him again. Not in person, on TV. Local news coverage of a police operation that shut down a few squatters in a condemned building not far from downtown. Ben was there, helmet on, vest zipped up, face blank and unreadable as he helped escort a young guy out in cuffs. The camera caught him just long enough for me to recognize him, but not long enough to explain anything about what he was doing. I muted the TV, just stared. He looked like a completely different person. Later that night, I ran into Cam outside the building, smoking. He saw my face and raised an eyebrow. "You good?" I hesitated, then said, "You remember that cop from the protest?" Cam snorted. "The hot one you couldn't stop staring at?" I rolled my eyes. I ran into him again. Cam flicked ash onto the curb. "And by ran into, you mean?" "We've talked." "A few times." He gave me a look. "Define, talked." I ignored the question. "Saw him on TV today. He was part of that raid on 9th. Cam's expression shifted. "Shit. Seriously?" I nodded. And then, because I hated myself a little in that moment, I added, "I don't know why I feel like I need to see him again." Cam exhaled slowly. "Because your dick's dumb and your heart's dumber." "Thanks." He gave me a look. "Just be careful, man. Don't fall for someone who wears a badge and says all the right things while doing all the wrong ones." I didn't respond, because deep down, I was already halfway there. It wasn't until Friday night that it happened. I was walking home from the corner store, headphones in, hood up, when I turned onto my street and saw someone sitting on the stoop of my building. I didn't recognize him at first. He was hunched over, arms on his knees, face half in shadow. But then he looked up. "Ben." I stopped in my tracks. "Hey," he said softly. "Didn't mean to just show up." I pulled my hood back. "You were on TV." He nodded like he'd been expecting that to come up. "I figured you saw. You can explain what the hell that was?" He stood, slow, like he wasn't sure if I was going to slam the door on him or not. "It was an order," he said. "And yeah, I had issues with it. But walking off the job doesn't stop it from happening. Someone else just steps in." "That's your excuse?" "No," he said. "It's just reality." I didn't say anything. Just stared at him, heart pounding. "Can I come up?" he asked. "Just to talk." I hesitated, then nodded. We climbed the stairs in silence. My apartment was dark, only one lamp on near the kitchen. I kicked my shoes off, left his by the door, and motioned for him to sit wherever. Instead of sitting, he stood by the window, looking out like he didn't know where to start. "I don't know why I came," he said finally. I couldn't stop thinking about you." "Ben, I know," he said quickly, turning around. "You hate what I do. I get it. I don't blame you." "It's not just that," I said. "I don't know who you are. I don't know which version is real. The guy at the protest, the guy in the bar, or the guy dragging people out of a building on live TV." His jaw clenched. "They're all me. That's not comforting." "I'm not trying to comfort you," he said. "I'm trying to be honest." The silence stretched between us. Finally, I asked, "Why do you keep showing up?" He looked at me. Really looked. "Because this feels different, and I don't want to let it go." That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, throat tight. "You can't just drop in and out of my life, Ben. You don't get to show up when it's convenient." "I know." "Then what do you want?" He stepped closer, and when he spoke, his voice was low. Careful, like he was afraid of saying too much. I want to know what it would feel like to stay. We stood there, only a few feet between us now. The city hummed quietly outside the window, distant sirens wailing somewhere too far away to matter. And then he reached out. Just barely, his fingers brushing mine. No pressure, no force. Just enough to ask a question without words. I didn't pull away. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch more than that. But something shifted. I think we both felt it. I didn't have answers that night. Still don't, honestly. But I knew one thing for sure as I stood in my kitchen, fingers tangled with a man I wasn't supposed to trust. I wanted to find out. The first time he stayed over, he didn't touch me. He slept on top of the blanket, fully clothed, arms crossed behind his head like he was just there to rest his eyes, not shift the gravity of my entire world. I lay inches away, staring at the ceiling for what felt like hours, listening to his breath slow. It should have felt tense. It should have felt wrong. But it didn't. It felt calm. The next morning, we didn't talk about it. We had coffee, like two guys who didn't occupy opposite ends of a very messy spectrum. I handed him a mug, and he took it with a tired smile like he'd been here 100 times before. We didn't talk about the protest, or the squatters, or the uniform folded in the bag he carried over his shoulder when he left. For the next few weeks, he came over about once a week. Sometimes late, sometimes just for an hour. Always in civilian clothes. Always after work. And always quiet about it. It didn't take long for me to start making space for him without meaning to. A second toothbrush. A sweatshirt he forgot on the back of my chair. A six-pack of the beer he liked in my fridge even though I never drank it. I told myself it wasn't anything. I told myself I was just lonely. That he was just convenient. That it didn't matter. But it did. One night he came over later than usual. Looked exhausted. He didn't say much when he came in, just kissed me on the cheek and sank onto my couch with a groan. "Rough night?" I asked. He let out a low laugh. "That obvious? Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then shrugged. Guy OD'd in the back of a laundromat. By the time we got there, it was too late. Kid couldn't have been older than 22. I sat beside him. Quiet. "I've been to that building a dozen times," he added. "Used to chase guys out for sleeping in the dryer stalls. They'd use the coin slots to heat the place up. They never bothered anyone. Just cold." I watched him stare at nothing. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," he said quietly. And for the first time, I realized, he wasn't trying to win me over. He wasn't giving me some polished story. He wasn't saying what I wanted to hear. He was just tired. Tired of the wait. Tired of the contradictions. Tired of himself. I leaned back, letting my hand rest on his thigh. "You don't have to be anything right now," I said. He nodded. Didn't say anything else for the rest of the night. The shift came slowly. I started thinking about him when he wasn't around. Not just in that casual, maybe he'll show up tonight way, but in the deeper, unspoken kind of way, where you start planning your day with another person in mind, where you check the time and wonder what they're doing, where you catch yourself hoping they're thinking about you too. And then it happened. Cam found out. We were grabbing drinks with a few people from the housing group. Someone brought up the raid on 9th again, how a friend's cousin had been roughed up during the sweep, how no one was answering questions about who approved it. Cam looked at me sharply and said, "Your guy wasn't there, was he?" The table went quiet. I tried to play dumb. "What guy?" Cam leaned in. "Don't bullshit me. The cop." A few people shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. "You seeing a cop?" one of the organizers asked, half joking, half not. I felt my face heat. "It's not like that." "What's it like then?" Cam said. "You hooking up with the same guy who could be tracking our meetings?" "Jesus, Cam. No, seriously. You think pillow talk with a badge doesn't come with strings? You think he's not reporting back to someone?" "He's not like that." "Oh. He's one of the good ones?" The sarcasm in his voice was brutal. I stood up. "I'm not doing this here." Cam didn't follow. No one did. I left the bar feeling like I'd been split down the middle. When I got home, Ben was already there, sitting on my couch, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware. "You tell anyone about us?" I asked, slamming the door harder than I meant to. He looked up, startled. "What?" I said, "Have you told anyone about me?" "No," he said immediately. "Why?" I stared at him. "Because I'm getting grilled by my friends like I'm some traitor." Ben's face tightened. "What did you tell them?" I didn't have to tell them anything. They figured it out. He stood, crossing the room. "Look, I don't know what they said, but I've never said a word about you to anyone. Not at work, not to my partner, not even in passing." I believed him. I hated that I did. I sat down, head in my hands. "I can't do this, Ben." He didn't say anything at first. Then, carefully, "Do what?" "Live in the middle of this. Pretend this thing between us doesn't come with fallout." "I'm not asking you to pretend." "Yes, you are. Every time you show up in jeans instead of a uniform, you're pretending." He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he said, quietly, "You want me to stop coming over?" I looked up at him. "I don't know what I want," I whispered. He nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. As he walked out, he paused, looked back at me. "When you figure it out," he said, "you know where to find me." The door closed behind him, and I sat there, staring at the space he'd just left, feeling like I'd lost something I hadn't even let myself admit I wanted. I didn't reach out for 2 weeks. I kept my head down, buried myself in community meetings, organizing drives, late nights printing flyers and writing press statements about a city that no longer felt like it belonged to us. If anyone noticed the way I was avoiding eye contact, or the way I kept checking my phone when I thought no one was looking, they didn't say anything. But I knew Cam knew. He kept his distance too. No snide remarks, no follow-up questions. Just this quiet absence, like he was giving me space to clean up my own mess. Except I wasn't cleaning it up. I was letting it rot. Ben didn't text, didn't show up, didn't loiter by the bodega or pop into the protest forums to observe. He disappeared as quickly as he'd arrived, and that was supposed to be the end of it. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. One night, I was walking home past the community center, our usual meeting spot, when I saw a familiar figure outside. Hoodie pulled up, hands in pockets, standing just far enough from the steps to look like he wasn't trying to be noticed. Ben. My heart kicked. I almost kept walking. I almost passed right by him, like I didn't know him, like we hadn't spent hours talking on that couch, sharing things I hadn't said to anyone in years. But I didn't. I stopped. He looked up, his face shadowed under the dim street lamp. "Didn't think you'd come out this way anymore," I said, arms crossed. He gave a small shrug. "Didn't come for you." "Bullshit." He cracked a tired smile. "All right, maybe I hoped I'd see you." I didn't move. He shifted slightly. "Look, I'm not here to start something. I wanted to make sure you were okay." I laughed. "Now you care?" "I always cared. You just didn't want to hear it." My jaw clenched. "You think showing up here helps anything?" "No, I don't. But staying away didn't either." We stood in silence for a few seconds. The city moved around us. Cars passing, someone shouting half a block away, the low thrum of bass from an open apartment window. Normal chaos. Comfortable almost. Ben shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. "I'm transferring." That made me blink. "What?" "I put in for a transfer, out of patrol, into a civilian liaison program. It's mostly desk work, policy reviews, community accountability. It's not perfect, but it's something." I stared at him. "You did that because of me?" "No," he said, then looked at me. "But you made me think about things differently." I didn't know what to say to that. He took a step closer, not invading, Just testing. You asked me what I wanted last time, he said quietly. I still want to know what it feels like to stay, but only if you want that too. I felt something shift in my chest. You're still a cop, I said. That doesn't just go away. I know. And it's gonna be messy. He nodded. I know. I looked down at my feet, then back up at him. I'm not gonna defend you to my friends. I'm not asking you to, and I'm not gonna pretend this isn't complicated. Ben smiled softly. I'm not great at simple anyway. I should have said no. Should have told him to leave. Should have protected myself from what I knew this would turn into. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer. Just a little, just enough to close the space between us. His hand brushed mine. I didn't pull away. I hate how much I missed you, I muttered. I hate how much that makes me feel like I'm allowed to be here. I laughed under my breath. You're not. I'll earn it, he said. And somehow, I believed him. We didn't kiss. Not then. We just stood there, side by side, under the quiet hum of a broken streetlight, like we'd found some middle ground that only existed when the world wasn't watching. That night, he didn't come home with me, and I didn't ask him to. But something had changed. We'd crossed a line neither of us could uncross. And, for the first time, I didn't want to. After that night, things didn't magically get easier. But they got different. Ben didn't start showing up at my door unannounced anymore. We didn't fall into some kind of convenient routine. There weren't sleepovers or whispered confessions. It wasn't like that. It was more like we showed up for each other when it mattered. Sometimes he'd meet me after a late-night strategy session, and we'd walk the long way to my place, talking about politics or music or the weird stuff people leave on park benches. Other times I'd swing by his building on a Saturday morning and we'd grab coffee, not saying much, just existing next to each other like that was enough. It wasn't a relationship. But it was something, and that something kept pulling me in, even when I knew I should have kept my distance. There was this one afternoon, early December, when I saw him in uniform again. I wasn't expecting it. I was out with Cam, actually, our first real one-on-one since the whole fallout. We were dropping off flyers at local businesses for an upcoming tenant rally. It was cold, breath visible kind of cold, and we were arguing about font choices of all things. And then we turned a corner, and there he was, Ben, talking to a store owner, leaning slightly against the doorframe like he wasn't wearing the weight of everything that came with the uniform. But he was. I could see it in his posture, the way his shoulders tensed when he saw me. Cam stopped walking. Ben looked from him to me, then straightened up. We didn't say anything, not at first. Then Ben nodded slightly, like a silent, I see you. I nodded back. Cam caught all of it. When Ben walked away, disappearing down the block, Cam lit a cigarette and just looked at me. That him? Yeah. Cam took a drag, exhaled slowly. Still a cop, huh? Still trying to be something else. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you still don't know what the hell you're doing, do you? Nope, Cam laughed. At least you're consistent. We finished our rounds without much more commentary. But that night, I thought about it a lot. What it meant to see Ben like that. To see the version of him I tried to separate from the one who held me when I couldn't sleep. The one who ran his fingers through my hair when I was too anxious to talk. The one who never pushed, never demanded anything, but always made sure I knew he was there. The lines were blurring fast, and I was the one holding the pen. A few days later, I came home to find an envelope slid under my door. No name on it, just my address in Ben's handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper, a folded printout. It was a resignation letter, short, direct, effective date, end of the month. I stared at it for a long time, like holding it might give me answers. I didn't even hear the knock until the second one came. Ben. No uniform. Just jeans, a sweatshirt, and a nervous look on his face. I wasn't gonna just leave it, he said, but I figured if I handed it to you, it might look like I was asking for something. You are, I said. He didn't deny it. I didn't do this for you, he said. I mean, not only for you. I've been thinking about it for a while. But, yeah, you made me want to stop making excuses. I let him in. We sat on the edge of my bed, like teenagers waiting to screw everything up. You know, it's not like quitting solves everything, I said. There's still all the history, all the damage. I know. You'll still be who you were. I'll also be who I'm trying to become. We sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't feel heavy anymore, just honest. Then he asked, "So what about you? What are you trying to become?" I looked at him, really looked. Someone who trusts, someone who forgives, someone who doesn't run the second it gets complicated. I don't know, I said, but I think I want to find out. He leaned in, slow, careful, and this time, I didn't stop him. We kissed. Not like it was new, but like it was finally allowed. When the city shut down for a late winter storm, everything slowed. Meetings were canceled, streets emptied, and for a whole day, it felt like the noise stopped long enough for us to breathe. Ben was already at my place that morning, trapped by timing and snow, curled under a blanket with a book he swore he'd read, eventually. I made oatmeal and coffee. He made fun of the fact that I still used a French press like a hipster from 2008. It was the most domestic thing I'd ever experienced. And it scared the hell out of me. Because somewhere between the silence and the shared blanket and the smell of burnt toast, I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to vanish or betray me or show up in a headline. He'd been here. Consistently. And that meant something. That day, we talked about everything. His new job, which hadn't officially started yet, but was already swarming his inbox with bureaucratic nonsense. My work with the Housing Coalition, how I was thinking of pushing harder for city council involvement, what it would mean for both of us if people started asking questions. They already have, I admitted. Cam's still wary. Ben nodded. He should be. You okay being the guy the first don't bring to the meetings? I've been that guy in worse situations. There was a long pause, the kind that stretches a little too far, and then he asked something that surprised me. What would it take for you to not feel like you're betraying something by being with me? I swallowed hard. I think I need to stop looking at you like you're two people, I said. You're not the guy the first see in bed and the guy the first see in a vest. You're just you. Flawed. Complicated. Trying. And that's enough? It has to be, I said, because that's who I am too. After that, things weren't perfect, but they were honest. Some people never came around. A few friends kept their distance, especially once word got out that Ben had left the force. Not as a whistleblower, not in protest, but quietly, with no fanfare. Some thought he was just jumping ship. Others thought I was being manipulated. But he stayed. Through the doubt. Through the discomfort. Through every long conversation that left both of us raw but understood. He showed up. That's what mattered. He started coming to the forums. Not in uniform, not as a representative of anything official. Just as Ben. He didn't speak much at first. Mostly listened. But when he did talk, it wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was awkward and real. He didn't try to win anyone over. He just told the truth. Sometimes that truth made people angry. Sometimes it made them cry. But he kept showing up anyway. Eventually, Cam thawed. Not with a big apology or anything dramatic, but with a simple gesture, offering Ben a cigarette at a community cleanup event. Ben declined, said he was trying to quit. Cam nodded. That was it, and that was enough. Months passed, seasons changed, and somewhere in the middle of it, I woke up one morning, turned over in bed, and saw him lying there beside me. One arm thrown carelessly over his eyes, breathing slow, and I realized I loved him. Not because he'd changed everything about himself, but because he hadn't tried to change me. Because he let things be messy. Because he believed we were worth figuring out. And because in a world that kept trying to divide everything into good and bad, right and wrong, hero and villain, he stayed. In the gray, with me.